Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Articulating with David Barnett. My name is Anna Thornton, and with me, as always, is David Barnett, the owner of the David Barnett Gallery. Welcome, David.
Thank you.
And today we are also joined by a very special guest virtually, Jeanne Spicuzza. And she is an actress, a screenwriter, director, producer, artist, poet, and composer. So welcome, Jeanne.
Did we get that right?
Thank you.
Did we cover everything?
Enough.
And so we wanted to have Jeanne on today because she is actually a relative of Sylvia Spicuzza, and we are very fortunate to have a large body of Sylvia's work in our collection. And she's actually one of our first legacy artists for our nonprofit that David started, Artist Resource Transnational. So all of the pieces of Sylvia's that we're going to be discussing today are part of that A.R.T collection. And if you want to learn more about that, we'll put a link in the description box for a previous podcast on A.R.T. But in today's session, we thought we would break it up into two parts. So the first part, we'll talk about Sylvia's life and her work as an artist. And then in part two, we'll talk about Jeanne's work and her different creative projects. So I hope that sounds good to everyone. Awesome.
How does that sound to you, Jeanne?
Sounds great to me.
Awesome. Well, I guess to start out, Jeanne, do you want to kind of tell us a little more about yourself and how you knew Sylvia and how you're related?
Well, I grew up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where you two are currently based. And my father, though there seems to be some debate about a 14th sibling, my father was the youngest of 13 siblings.
Wow.
I didn't realize that.
Yes, and his parents moved from Termini Imerese in Sicily. His father first, who started a fruit business like his father, and then my grandmother came over when she was 15, and their marriage had been arranged, and Sylvia was the daughter of Francesco Spicuzza, brother of my grandfather. We called him Ted Salvatore Spicuzza. And so my father and Sylvia are first cousins. And my family often had summer homes, cottages. So Sylvia, they had a cottage. My parents and my aunts had a cottage in Lauderdale Lakes. And we always had Francesco, Sylvia's father's, artwork everywhere. My aunt, Marjorie, who was one of the 13, of course, one of the siblings of my father, one of the younger ones, she started collecting Francesco's work before he was notable. So she was working in a bank. She eventually became the president, the first woman president of a bank in Milwaukee, Reliance Savings and Loan, I think the first in the Midwest, actually. And she would collect his work. She collected it. So it was everywhere in her house and everywhere in the summer house. And I would just look up at it. So there were small studies, and David is familiar with this. Francesco would do smaller studies, and he would do the larger studies. So we had both. And I just remember looking up at one of the small studies of his landscapes of snow in Wisconsin, and thinking, I do that. Not I want to do that or I'm going to do that, but I do that. It was already in there, I suppose. So I was very inspired. And then at family gatherings, this beautiful woman with red hair and very colorfully dressed would always come in a little later than everybody else. She was very fashionably late. And that was my cousin Sylvia Spicuzza, literally and figuratively fashionably late. And I always thought, who's that lady? From the time I was very little. And I got to know her as my cousin Sylvia Spicuzza, the art teacher. And everywhere I go, like I'd always hear people say, is Sylvia Spicuzza your relative? Because she was my art teacher at Lake Bluff Elementary, and I just loved her. I'd hear that all the time, and it was kind of great to hear that so often. So as I got to know Sylvia, I could see why. She was incredibly creative. And so that was the environment I grew up in. And I knew I was an artist from a really young age. So that was very encouraging to me. Although there were contingents of the family who were kind of not as pro art, let's say, because there was always that strain moving through the world, I think, about artists. And we are kind of an interesting breed. So, but it was so encouraging that Francesco's work was all around me and Sylvia's vivaciousness and passion for the arts was around me. And so that was my early life into my later years. So
Wow. And how did you two meet, David and Jeanne? Did you meet because of Sylvia, or was it something else that brought you together?
Do you want to answer that, Dave, or shall I?
I think you better. Where did
I can answer that if David wants me to. I met David because my father told me about David Barnett. There was an estate involved with Francesco Spicuzza's work after Sylvia passed away, and my father Robert told me about David, and David and I met, and there was quite the amount of electricity and connection immediately. I felt. I think David will agree with me on that one. That he was just telling me how much he loved Sylvia, and how passionate he was, and how she really gave him the impetus as an artist, and I thought that was just great. I was preparing to move to LA to make movies. And I'd already been working in Milwaukee as an artist. So we got along very splendidly from the start, I thought. Was there anything I left out there, David?
No, that's perfect.
Well, great. Thank you for that little intro. Would you like to move into talking about Sylvia's pieces?
Sure.
All right.
Let's do that.
Well, behind us on the easel, we have a piece called On Wisconsin. This is a piece that was created around 1950. And it's kind of almost a little bit Art Deco, but then it kind of has almost a Cubist style, the way the different planes are kind of broken up. David, how would you interpret this piece?
Yeah, this piece has always been somewhat mysterious to me because, like you're mentioning, the title On Wisconsin, and it has so many different, iconographic images in there. Mm-hmm. And so I've been trying to figure out how this painting came about and, why it was done. I'm thinking that maybe Sylvia might have done it for a competition for something.
Do we know the date? Do we know the date and the medium?
It's an oil painting. It's
Yeah.
around. We think it's around 1950.
Around 1950.
Yeah, does it say?
Okay.
It is.
Let's see, in 1950, that certainly would have been, I think that would have been when, was Sylvia teaching by then? I wish I knew
Yeah,
the
yeah,
exact
she was in
date.
class.
She was teaching by then, wasn't she?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that was the interesting thing. I have to say,
I think she started teaching there in 1943, but I'm not positive.
I think you're right. She had a brief period where she was not teaching because she got married. And her husband was a manager of a Woolworths and didn't want his wife working. That was very common in that time. She missed teaching so much that she decided to let go of the husband and go back to teaching. So that tells you something about Sylvia.
Yeah, she was only married from 1928 to 1933.
That's right. I was just going to say 5 years. She told me same. You know the Sylvia details, David. And I was going to say, I have not seen this piece before. What I find really interesting about Sylvia's work is, and I think this is in part because her primary profession was an educator, as an art educator. So she was not pressured to have a specific style that she was. What happens, I think, with some artists is it's wonderful to develop a style, but then for some artists, they become kind of trapped by it because people expect certain types of work to sell it. And Sylvia didn't have that burden. So you see so many variations in her work because she did do landscapes, but she also did more abstraction, which, David, I think at one time you told me that that was the direction that Francesco was leading up to around the time that he passed away, I think in 1964. So that was even before I was born. So I wouldn't have known about that. I knew about his post-impressionism primarily, and portraiture, which is what he was most known for, landscapes and portraiture. And there's an example of an artist who made his living as an artist who some say it could serve to sometimes limit the artist in what they were able to accomplish, whereas Sylvia didn't have those restraints or those constraints. So this is interesting because every time I see a piece of hers, it's like it doesn't have to fit into a mold. So this is an example of that because I've never seen the color that she chose is very interesting. I think the palette that she chose is very interesting. And I wonder if that lends itself a little to the title because it does almost have, if you guys notice, kind of flag-like colors and styles within this image.
Red, white, and blue.
Yeah, exactly. Very distinct red, white, and blue. And very, I think, very kind of distinct shapes. Like the square, the circle, the leaf. If you look at flags of different states, I wonder if she may have designed this, like you were saying, David, maybe she designed it for a competition, for a flag competition. I don't know. That's interesting.
I don't know what it would have been for. I wish she was around. We could ask her.
Yeah.
What do you think, Sylvia? Maybe you could tell me.
But it does have a lot of mystery. So this was one of the paintings. So at the estate sale, I took my daughter Sarah at the time. So this was 1998. So Sarah was born in 1994. So Sarah was 4 years old, and I told her the estate sale started on a Friday, but we had different family commitments, so we couldn't get there till the last day, the final third day on Sunday. So I went there with Sarah and I gave her a package of red stickers. I said, Sarah, anything you see here that you like, put a red sticker on it, and then we'll come back and collect all our treasures. And so this particular painting is one that Sarah picked out. Yeah.
Did she tell you what about it attracted her when she got it? Did she say it was the color, the graphics, or just all the above? Just in general, it jumped out at her?
We were kind of in a kind of a acquisition frantic mode because it was the last day and there was lots of people there. And so we just, we didn't really have time to talk about the individual pieces. We were just, putting our stickers on everything. We bought about 200 pieces.
Wow, 200 pieces.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's amazing.
But,
well, David's talking about this estate sale. There's a whole story behind that because I got wind of that when sometimes I would go to visit Sylvia and we would talk a lot about the history of the family and talk a lot about Francesco and talk a lot about her and her work and her experiences. And I would help her defrost her freezer while we did this in her home in Milwaukee near Sherman Park. And she told me her intentions were to give her work to Northwestern, her alma mater, one of her alma maters. I know that wasn't the only one. And her intention was that they would make a gallery of Spicuzza work. And I said to her, you're going to want to stipulate that in your will. If that's your intention, you're going to have to make sure you stipulate that, because if you don't, then they're not required to do that. And unfortunately, she didn't stipulate it, apparently. So they did this mass auction that David is describing. I think that's part of what led you, David, to get involved in legacy arts from that experience.
Yes, because it was a very disturbing, unpleasant experience that Northwestern University, as such a prestigious university, didn't respect her work or her dad's work, and so that was a tragedy. I tried to stop the sale, but there was nothing I could do about it because
I called
you
the
said there was
office of the and they actually sadly didn't know who Sylvia was when I called in, and they were actually in the process of auctioning her work or about to auction her work, and they didn't know who she was. So it was really about a liquidation sale and getting a hold of whatever monies were gained. It wasn't really about the art itself, it seemed. So not to throw shade, but that is what happened. One can't deny the facts. So
yeah, unfortunately,
that's good for artists to know. That's good for artists to know, by the way. You have to be really specific about what your intentions are with your work.
yeah, and,
Without a doubt.
right, and even if you have a stipulation in the will, what's been happening now for decades already is museums are deaccessioning artworks, even against the will of the donors. It happened with the Barnes Foundation. They trashed Dr. Barnes' legacy with his. They moved his museum, changed it. They just did that more recently in Washington, D.C. with the Phillips collection. The new director there decided that he wanted to sell some George O'Keeffe's and some other masterpieces that Duncan Phillips had acquired, and he's wanted to cash them in to buy new artists' works, and which even Duncan Phillips' granddaughter tried to stop it, but the new board would hear nothing of it, and so this is going on now all over the world, and it's a tragedy. There's no respect.
Yeah, that's a sad statement too. After all art has really been around since as certainly at least the dawn of what we would call human Homo sapien existence. I mean, from the very beginnings of what we can see, things that are excavated in southeastern Iraq, which they believe is pretty much the seat of most human civilization, and onward. It's really the longest standing practice we human beings were made to create. So to not respect that, to me, it's so contrary to what human dignity is. So it's hard. It's always been hard for me to understand why that is not more respected. I'm very glad I was mentored by David Lynch. I know David knows a little bit about this, the filmmaker David Lynch, and thankfully he left everything to his children. I know Jennifer Lynch somewhat, and they're taking very good care of his legacy. I think he did the right thing leaving it with his children for that reason, because what you're describing, David, unfortunately, is you think that even leaving it to a museum or some other type of artistic or academic institution is going to render a certain respectfulness in its treatment. But that's not always the case, unfortunately.
No, and like with Sylvia's sister Marguerite, Marguerite donated all of her Spicuzzas to the Milwaukee Art Museum, and they had deaccessioned all of them.
I heard about that. They were, when I was still in college, and this was in the late 80s and early 90s, obviously there were peers in my art classes who, as a job, they took security guard jobs at the art museum in Milwaukee. And they would say, "Are you related to a Spicuzza, a painter?" And I said, you're probably referring to my great uncle Francesco Spicuzza. And they said, well, there's a whole lot of his works. There must be over 50 or 150. I don't remember how many. They said at least 50 to 150 in the basement. They were in the basement. They didn't have them exhibited. And I mentioned that to someone who worked at the art museum a couple of decades ago. And she said, well, I'll look into it, and I never heard from her. I think there wasn't much anyone could do about that because they were with the museum. I'm sure Marguerite's intention was that they would exhibit them, but that seems that never came about.
No. No.
So I guess this is good, what you're doing with the podcasts and showing artworks, because I guess the more we communicate about art, which is really what art is for. It's a form of human communication and expression. The more we talk about it, I suppose, hopefully the more people become aware, the more respect and the more admiration people will experience for it. I hope. That would be the hope, anyway.
Right. And so that's the main mission of A.R.T, Artist Resource Transnational, is not that we're going to solve the world's peace problems, because the world is too screwed up, but in some small way, if I can help to create world peace through the exchange of visual culture, and instead of these works going into a dumpster or into someone's basement and never see the light of day, they have raise enough money to constantly be traveling around the world. And so instead of people hurting each other, killing each other over differences in ideologies, if they can start treating each other, like you were saying, more humanely, then that's what we're going to try to do.
It's a good mission. It's a good mission. You have to start somewhere.
You have to start somewhere. Yeah. Okay, so what's the next artwork that we're going to talk about?
Let's talk about Sylvia's self-portrait. So this piece is Sylvia's self-portrait with a student creating a mobile. It was created in 1950. It's a watercolor on paper. And the reason I wanted to highlight this piece is self-portraits of artists are just so important because they give you a lot of insight into the artists themselves, how they see themselves, how they see their creative outlook on life. And what really stood out to me about this piece was that it's not just a portrait of her, but it's her with a student. And I think that speaks to what you were saying, Jeanne, about her identity as an educator and how she felt called to kind of nurture that younger generation of artists. And
I agree.
Yeah.
I'm just noticing the similarity, Jeannie, in your eyes and Sylvia's eyes in the painting.
Thank you. Oh, that's an honor.
And I would have the auburn hair if it were not for the fact that I've been layering it dark for various roles in the last couple of projects I've worked on, but normally I do have the auburn hair like Sylvia's, so there would be even more resemblance. The first thought that I had as you were speaking, Anna, about why you were attracted to this piece, and not only is this self-portraiture, but it's self-portraiture in her daily life, right? In her work specifically. And so the thing that came to mind, and you guys are probably familiar with the piece because it's very celebrated, is the Velázquez piece, The Little Maids, where he decides to paint himself into his own studio, creating a painting of this young lady being doted upon. And I know that it was Foucault who did a study on that and how that captures a certain moment in time and how unique it is to capture a moment in time as it's unfolding, which is what this is doing. You don't see many artists doing that. Even when they do self-portraiture, they'll have their face front and center, perhaps. Van Gogh did it obviously quite a lot. But Sylvia actually did kind of a Velázquez thing here, where she was doing something very unique, I think. It's very interesting that she chose to do this. And in watercolor, no less. David, you mentioned she often worked in watercolor. I didn't see a lot of her watercolors. I saw so many different mediums. I didn't realize that she worked in that medium as much as she did.
Mm-hmm.
And David, you said that Sylvia was your first art teacher. Do you want to kind of share with our viewers maybe some memories about her being your teacher? And
So Sylvia was very enthusiastic and encouraged me as an artist, and because of Sylvia, I thought of myself as an artist from the time I was 5 or 6 years old. And I still can remember so clearly, she was having the children in the class draw their hands. And so she came over and held my hand and helped me to draw my hand, because I wasn't very good at that, but you can see how prominent her hand is there.
yeah.
Yeah. But I was...
And that's significant. I mean, the artist's hands are very significant.
Yeah, but it was something that stuck in my brain, and so it really encouraged me to become an artist.
What about you, Jeanne? Do you have memories of making art with Sylvia as a child?
The closest thing we came to making art together, I think, were our conversations. Our conversations were very artful. We talked about so many things, her early experiences. She remembers the first time that their family, they were able to afford carpeting. One can imagine that this was before central heat and central air, and things like this during her early years when she was very little. And she remembers her parents dancing on the first rug that they were able to afford because it kept their feet warmer from walking on the wood floors when they were cold, especially in Wisconsin winters. So those were the kind of conversations. And she was so visual, even in her language. She was very visual, as you can imagine, because she was a very visual person. I wrote a poem about Camille Claudel that repeated the line, why didn't you use your hands? I think artists' hands obviously carry a lot of weight and carry a lot of history and carry a lot of importance. So I think it's interesting, David, that you pointed that out, that she's painting her own hands and how she's working with this student. I think that's kind of amazing, actually, because if you really think about it, that's, whether she was conscious of it or not, that's pretty significant, I think.
Well, shall we move on to our next piece?
Sure.
Okay.
Why don't we do this watercolor here, since we're talking about watercolors?
Can you see this okay, Jeanne?
I can. Thank you for doing that, Anna. Yes, I can see that. Wow.
This one is called Biomorphic Flowers.
I think Sylvia was ahead of her time. That's what I think. I think she was ahead of her time.
Yeah, you definitely get the sense that there are different floral elements, but as the title suggests, they are kind of morphing into
That one is signed too.
other shapes. Yeah, it's signed in the lower right corner.
Sometimes you can tell from her style, because her, like you were saying, Jeannie, her images, the change, she had such a diverse range of styles and things, and her signatures were the same. She had a multiplicity of different signatures from different times.
Yeah, because remember, you commented on that. You gave me a piece where she signed it Silvana.
Yes.
As opposed to Sylvia Spicuzza, she signed it Silvana.
Yeah.
So she was very whimsical in her approach, even down to her signature.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
It does have an almost kind of, I guess, what would you call it, a botanical element to this piece. Like you were pointing out, Anna, you saw the biomorphic element because beyond the floral quality, it's almost as though you're looking at it perhaps under a microscope or something, right? It has that quality. It has that quality. Something botanical, of something scientific as well as artistic.
Yeah, like George O'Keeffe, would take up a flower, take something that's very tiny and blow it up so huge, and so this series of watercolors that Sylvia did, to me, they're very similar to George O'Keeffe's. The ones that George O'Keeffe did
That's interesting.
in the 19s. Yeah.
I wonder if she was inspired by that at all. We didn't talk about George O'Keeffe specifically, but I wonder if there was some inspiration there.
Yeah, I don't know.
Now, I have a question too, looking at the color itself, particularly that almost turquoise or teal blue in the background. So is that transparent watercolor or is there gouache in there, do you think? Because if it's not gouache, it's heavily layered, isn't it? I mean, really incredibly, with the layering levels there to get that kind of color from a watercolor.
Does any of it look like gouache or no?
No, I think it's probably just a really saturated watercolor.
That's amazing to me to get that kind of color, to get that kind of pop of color from watercolor, especially transparent watercolor. Would take a lot of layering. But you'd have to be really skilled at it without it looking muddy, which it doesn't.
Right.
So you've got to give her credit also for her technical capabilities here.
Oh, I mean, the way she handled every medium was magical, really. Now, one of the areas that we didn't touch on here, or aren't going to touch on today, is her finger paintings, which were absolutely astounding.
Oh.
Yeah.
And I don't think I've ever seen those, actually, come to think of it. I don't recall seeing them. Wow. Go Sylvia.
Maybe next session we'll pull one out.
You guys can pick your favorite ones, your favorite finger paintings. This is amazing. You know, I was recently watching an old program. This guy was talking about how he paints with his feet. You know, this was some rerun from something or other that came on, and I was just kind of interested in what he had to say. But finger painting, which obviously doesn't often get attention in fine arts, but there's an artfulness to that too, isn't there?
Okay, so this next piece is called Head of a Young Woman in Landscape. It's a color crayon drawing and has a stamped estate stamp signature, which we created for the estate.
Wow, you designed the estate stamp?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Well, we took it from one of her signatures,
Yeah. Were you able to
but it had
see
the
this?
rubber stamp made.
Oh, wow, that's great.
Yeah.
Isn't that great? She gives so much detail, emotion, and personality in her pieces, doesn't she?
She sure does.
What is your interpretation of what's going on? Because what strikes me at first is just how large the head is in comparison to everything else that's going on.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So, I mean, the first thing that pops into my head is this is one of her students,
Oh,
and that's taking center stage.
that would make sense.
What are your thoughts?
Yeah, maybe it's a student and they're kind of daydreaming and there's all these different elements kind of floating around and it's like a little peek inside their mind or something.
How about you, Jeannie? What do you think?
My first thought was it's very illustrative. It looks like it could be a text illustration, not that it was or even intended for that purpose, but it has that quality. The other thought I had was, David, I wondered if you ever noticed this, because unfortunately by the time I knew Sylvia more intimately, visiting her and things like that, she was not teaching it anymore. She was retired. In fact, when my daughter Stephanie came with me one day and she said, "This is what I miss," and put her hands on Stephanie's shoulders, on her head, she missed the kids. I wonder if you ever noticed her drawing or sketching, maybe while the kids were working on a project or something, and when she wasn't busy attending to that, if you ever saw her doing sketching of her own or anything. Because I wonder if some of these sketches came in the classroom even, like while the kids were there.
Yeah, I don't really remember. The only thing, as I said from earlier in our conversation, where she was having us draw hands and she drew a hand for me.
Oh, that's great. Okay, here's something, I don't know if you remember this, and this touches on what we're looking at. I had heard from one of her students that she used to do something at Halloween where she'd play this record about like ghosts and spooks and things like that, and the kids were supposed to draw what they were hearing. Do you remember ever doing that at Halloween? No? I'm going to have to get a little more detail about that, because apparently this is a thing that she did, where she would have them draw what they heard, and it was some kind of like Halloween styled symphony for young people. These were the kinds of creative things that she would do.
Well, it's very interesting that you should say that, because I have always painted to music.
And that was a Sylvia thing, apparently.
I guess subconsciously, I got that from Sylvia.
Wow.
Thank you, Jeannie.
Osmosis.
Thank you.
Osmosis.
I like it. So next July, or this coming July, I'm going to do an exhibition based on the music of George Gershwin.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah, and so so part of the show is going to be Heinzel Kunzmann, who teaches piano at the Conservatory of Music, he's going to come out to the house and play the piano while I'm painting and interpreting the music. And Jake is going to come out and film it.
Beautiful.
And that's going to be part of the exhibition in July, along with 24 original woodcuts by Kandinsky from Klanga, from sounds that he did from 1906 to about 1911. So it's going to be a really cool show.
This is in July, sir?
In July.
This year?
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Oh, that sounds amazing.
And then the other part of the show will be paintings, lithographs, different mediums of artworks from the gallery inventory by artists that George Gershwin collected, like Renoir, Kandinsky, George Rouault, artists like that. Picasso. Yeah. Sorry, I got off on a tangent there.
No, that's so interesting that there's that connection, because who knows, you may have inadvertently picked that up from Sylvia somewhere along the way.
I think I did. I give her credit. All right, what's next?
Me too. I give her a lot of credit too. She was definitely an influence. And you realize she's influencing, and I think Anna can understand this too. There's an age where young people are so heavily influenced. Generally, language, for example, they say is very much embedded by the age of 7 or 8. And language, only about 20% of language is spoken. The other 80% of language is other forms of communication, like visual communication. So when you've got someone like Sylvia who's influencing young people, I think, did she do K through 6 then at Lake Bluff?
That's correct. She was my art teacher from kindergarten through 6th grade.
So, when you think about that, from 4 until generally you're about 11, those are really very, I think, very formative years for any young person, especially an artistic person. And so when you think about the impact that had to have on people, and probably why I kept hearing so often from people, I loved her. Was that your relative? She was my favorite teacher of all time. I would hear that so often from people. And I think teaching arts, but she loved teaching the arts. For her, teaching the arts was also an art form. Not everyone thinks of it that way, but it certainly was like that for her. Very much so.
So, Jeanne, you mentioned on the last piece that kind of had an illustrative quality, and I feel like we really get a sense of that with this piece. It's titled Billy the Brownie Laughing, and it was created around 1945. But I'm curious to know, David, do you know if Billy the Brownie was a particular character in the story?
Yeah, Billy the Brownie. This was a character developed by Gimbel's Department Stores. And so there was a competition, and artists would submit their ideas for Billy the Brownie.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And that's hers. And what's the medium we're looking at here? Is this another watercolor?
Gouache and watercolor.
Wash and watercolor.
Right.
I think so.
I like the framing on this too. I like the choice of the textured framing. I think the more obvious choice for a lot of people would have been something more streamlined, but it mirrors this sort of character of Billy the Brownie with his tree and everything. So I like that choice.
Yeah. Yeah, the foliage.
It's more organic. Yeah, it mirrors the organic quality of the illustration, doesn't it?
Yeah,
very nice.
Yeah, the leaf motif in
the colors
in the frame.
The coloring works really well with the image. That's really good. Without competing with the image, it works well with the image. So that's an art form in itself too, isn't it? To find the right
framing definitely is, and it's something that we've done now for 59 years. And it makes such a difference if it's done correctly.
Did you know that's why Francesco, he designed his own frames for that reason?
Yes, yeah. So and we have some of them actually that were hand carved and then painted.
Painted. He did that. Yeah, he did that.
Kandinsky painted his frames too gray.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I like that.
Yeah.
That's talk about attention to detail. When you imagine that even the framing itself, how it's going to be presented, is in the mind of the artist. That I think that's phenomenal. I think that is just so amazing when you realize what the human mind and hands and heart can do, what it can create.
So this is Woman with a Coat and a Fancy Hat. It's created also around 1950. It's signed Spicuzza in the lower right. You mentioned earlier, David, that she would kind of play around with her signatures. Mm-hmm. Is this one of her earlier or later, or did she kind of bounce around?
I'm not really sure.
Yeah.
I think it's earlier.
I thought the same. I thought this looked like a very, earlier work for sure. Maybe it's simply because it is graphite, but just knowing how Sylvia's work, because I think some of her early works were very heavily influenced by Francesco.
Definitely.
I think she sort of moved into her own styles and designs and mediums going forward.
Yeah, so I even questioned whether this was by him.
Yeah. It's hard to say. If I saw the signature, I'd probably know. You might know too, David, looking closely at the signature, because Francesco obviously had a very specific style of signature for the most part.
Yeah, and this didn't look like his.
Yeah, but that tells you how early it is, because she's doing Spicuzza as opposed to Sylvia Spicuzza or Silvana. And a lot of her early works, she just did Spicuzza like her father,
Mm-hmm.
So that's the thing. But yeah, even from what I can see from this distance, and it's kind of hard to tell, but it doesn't look like Francesco's to me either, from even where I'm sitting.
I mean, the apparel looks earlier, doesn't it? I mean, I think of I think of the 1930s.
I thought the same. My thought was like maybe around between 33 and 38 or somewhere in there. Just looking at it, I thought same. I had that feeling too.
Yeah, we might have to rethink the date.
Do some more digging, yeah.
It's hard. It can be hard to tell, but it does look like that was my thought too, David. I thought 30s as soon as I saw it.
Yeah. All right.
That was my.
Well, then we must be correct.
What do you think, Sylvia?
Yeah.
Help us out here. We're trying to catalog you.
All right, our final piece is a lino cut. And this is actually interesting, but it's because it was created after she passed, I believe. Do you want to explain that, David?
So I actually acquired a number of original lino cut blocks from Sylvia, and so this is one of them. So I actually printed these from one of the hand cut lino blocks that Sylvia produced.
And you chose the inks. You chose the inks, then the color,
Mm-hmm.
and the style of ink.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's called Noel. So I mean, obviously she did this for Christmas cards to send out. Yeah.
That must have been it.
So this is printed in gold, we've also printed this in like a blue, purplish blue.
Mm.
Yeah.
Beautiful. I like the gold.
I'm gonna send you one of these.
Thank you. Oh my gosh, I'd love one.
I thought, because with your work with your films with the angels and everything, I was thinking about that, and I thought, I've got to send that to Jeannie.
Well, there's a scene. There's a scene in Making Angels, because of course David knows this, Anna. It's very much a love letter to artists, this project Making Angels. And there is a scene specifically where one of the characters, you can see that the entire wall to wall is different artworks. And I want to make sure that the artworks we secure for that scene have a lot of meaning, obviously, because that's a very important scene, what takes place in that scene and what you're seeing. And you can imagine, there's really no such thing as a throwaway shot or a throwaway scene or a throwaway moment. Everything has meaning if you're giving it meaning, if you're seeing the meaning, you know. So you picture this character who's sitting in a chair, a rocking chair, and this entire wall is just covered. And I think I in part got that from my Aunt Marjorie, going full circle, the one who was among the first to collect Francesco Spicuzza, Sylvia's father's works. She had that in her house. She was literally running out of space of where to put works, because she would, like, her whole, and this was the family home. This was where my father grew up. Her home was, now it's, my brother lives there. And there's a stairway that has all of these walls, and it was like wall to wall to wall. She had work all over this entire stairway that wound upwards. It was incredible. It was really incredible to see that. So, and every work, she could point to each and every one, and it had a story and it had a reason. And she said, a lot of people say, did you know how important this work is, or do you know how valuable that work is? And she said, I just got what I loved. And I think that's pretty amazing. You know, you have a family who's a member who's a banker, who's like, this artistic sensibility. It's for everybody. Art is for everybody. It really is for everybody. You want to make sure that you touch that part of the heart and that part of the soul. I think with Stella Adler, you're going to appreciate this, David, but Stella Adler said, life beats down the soul and art reminds you that you have one.
Mm. Wow.
Beautiful.
I think so too. It doesn't promise that it's going to take it all away. It promises, though, that it's going to share in the human experience. And I don't think you could do any better than that. And nothing does that like the arts. Because it's so true. It's so truthful, somehow.
Yeah, and I've always been harping forever that the creative process is what we live for and what motivates us, and it's the only thing that's really going to improve civilization.
Yeah.
That's a great note to end on. Jeanne, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us today. We enjoyed getting to hear some of your memories about Sylvia and just getting to talk about some of her pieces with you. And we can't wait to film part 2 of this podcast where we get to talk about your work. So yeah, thank you for joining us today.
It's really been a great, wonderful honor and pleasure for me too. I've really enjoyed this, all of you. Thank you for bringing those memories to the forefront of my mind and reminding me why we do what we do.
Awesome. Thank you. And thank you to all of our viewers for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to like and subscribe so you never miss a new episode. Our next event at the gallery is on March 26th. That is an artist talk and demo with Tree Lind, who is a local artist. So we'd love to see you all there for that. And that's a wrap for us today.
Thanks for listening, and we look forward to seeing from you, hearing from you, and seeing you in the gallery.
All right, bye everyone.
Bye.
Bye, Jeanne.
Oh, bye. Wonderful.